Good evening, and welcome to the GTA chapter of Dying with Dignity Canada's Advanced Care Planning, or ACP Day event, Advance Requests in Focus, the Quebec Experience. First, let's get the housekeeping out of the way. For those of you here in person, washrooms are downstairs. They can also be accessed using the elevator. Also, please make sure that your cell phones are turned off. And for those of you participating on Zoom, please use the Q&A function at any time to post any questions you may have. They will be addressed at the end. Also, we have our social media websites that will be here shortly. Yes, please have a look at any and all of these. The Dying with Dignity website particularly has some excellent resources, stories, blog posts. There's any question you have can be answered by having a look at our social media. So please be aware of that. I'm Roz Doctorow, and I co-chair the Education Committee of the GTA chapter of Dying with Dignity. This is the third year that the GTA chapter has presented an in-person event on ACP Day, and we're also presenting today's event virtually to over 600 people across Canada. We want to acknowledge the support our chapter has received from Dying with Dignity Canada to help us bring you tonight's event. Also, many thanks to Ilan and Chris from Baron Media and Sebastian and Matthias from the Spadina Theatre for all their assistance. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us, either in person or virtually, and we know that you're in for a really very informative evening. I'd like to start the evening with a land acknowledgement. I quote Chelsea Vowell, who is a Métis woman and Cree language instructor, who said, "The way in which territorial acknowledgements are delivered must matter. Establishing a practice of acknowledgement can be part of wider attempts to address settler colonialism and build better relationships with Indigenous peoples. The GTA chapter of Dying with Dignity Canada is working to ensure that our practice of acknowledgement recognizes the valuable traditions and experiences of the First Nations people upon whose land we are guests. From the lands of the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaron and the Haudenosaunee and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we are in solidarity with Indigenous brothers and sisters to honor and respect the four directions, lands, waters, plants, animals, and ancestors that walk before us, and all of the wonderful elements of creation that exist. Our presence on this land is not to be taken for granted. We are grateful for the opportunity to share, meet, collaborate, live, and work on this land. So what is ACP Day? April 16th is Advanced Care Planning Day in Canada, and it's the perfect time to start conversations with your loved ones about what's important to you when it comes to future health care. Advanced care planning is a process of thinking about your values, beliefs, and wishes for future health and personal care, and sharing them with the people you trust. It can also include choosing who would make care decisions for you if you cannot make them for yourself. Our presentation tonight about advance requests is a perfect topic for ACP Day. A majority of Canadians support advance requests for medical assistance in dying, or MAID, and would like to make an advance request as part of their advanced care plan. In 2024, a survey found that 83% of Canadians support advance requests for MAID for individuals with a capacity-eroding condition who will eventually lose their ability to make decisions. However, the only province that has legislated approval for advance requests is Quebec. And that is why we have invited Dr. Georges L'Espérance to speak to us tonight about the context and processes by which Quebec became the only Canadian province whose government recognizes an individual's written end-of-life option, known as advance requests. Dr. L'Esperance is a neurosurgeon and a member of the Clinicians Advisory Council in Montreal. He pursued his neurosurgical training at Laval University in Quebec City. In 1998, he completed a master's in health services administration at the University of Montreal and received the Robert Wood Johnson's Award in 1998. While involved in academic medicine, he gave multiple lectures on scientific or ethical questions. He is currently an associate clinical professor at the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Montreal. His neurosurgical clinical experiences and his personal reflections naturally led him to question the purpose of medicine, in particular, over-medicalization and end-of-life issues. Since November 2014, he has been president of the Quebec Association for the Right to Die in Dignity, AQDMD, and now devotes most of his time to it and is involved in providing the ultimate compassionate care, assisted medical death for those who want it. We are extremely fortunate to have him with us tonight. And moderating tonight's event is the CEO of Dying with Dignity Canada, Helen Long. During her career, Helen has spent many years in the not-for-profit sector. CEO of Dying with Dignity Canada for the last 5 years, Helen led DWDC through the successful passage of Bill C7 in 2021, resulting in key amendments to Canada's medical assistance in dying legislation. She represented DWDC through the MAID parliamentary review process, which was completed in 2023. Today, Helen and her team continue to support and educate people across Canada about their end-of-life choice and care. They also advocate for changes to the legislation and healthcare systems that support Canadians in accessing their choice at end of life. Tonight, Georges will speak to us about his experiences related to advance requests in Quebec, and will also discuss how Quebec came to be the first province to approve of MAID. This will be followed by a conversation between Helen and Georges about the issues that Georges raises. We will then take questions from the floor, as well as questions noted in the Zoom Q&A from our virtual participants after that. We have a disclaimer that we would like you to note that the information presented today is accurate as of the present time. Please be aware that this information is provided for information only and shouldn't be considered healthcare, medical, or legal advice. The presentation is not intended to encourage or suggest to anyone that they should choose MAID. Should you require advice or counsel, or should you have questions regarding medical or legal matters, please contact the appropriate licensed professional. And now, please join me in welcoming Helen and Georges.
Well, thank you very much to be here. I would like to, first of all, say thank you to Dying with Dignity Canada, and particularly to Helen Long, Sarah Dobeck, Kelsey Gelford, Daniel Ramcharitar, and Ross Doctorow, who called me many months ago to be here in Toronto. In fact, I'm pretty sad to be here because tonight Montreal Canadian is playing his last game of the year.
Sorry.
I don't follow hockey at all. And also it's the French debate. I'm very sad to miss it. But don't worry, I will probably look at it sometimes. Okay. And I'm very glad to be here in the building of the Alliance Française, so I can speak English in the building of the Alliance Française. Wow. So, I'm a neurosurgeon, but don't worry, I don't practice anymore. And I'm president of AQDMD since 2014. I don't have any conflict of interest, and I'm a MAID provider in Montreal. AQDMD has been founded in 2007 by Madame Helen Long, who was a nurse. She's still very well alive, and she's very well involved in, very much involved in problems of society, for example, for climate. We have 7 volunteers, administrator. We don't have any fees for any conference at all. And since 2020, we have a grant from the government of Quebec to make information on the population and all that. So with that fees from the government of Quebec, we're able to hire a general manager who is for 2 weeks ago in a pregnant. Pregnant? No, she just had a baby. Birth? Pregnant. How do you say that? Un congé de grossesse.
Delivered the baby.
Delivered
had
baby.
A baby.
But I'm not I'm not responsible of that. So, what our mission is, AQDMD works to ensure that each citizen can legally choose and receive end-of-life care that includes medical assistance in dying, in accordance with their own concept of dignity. The mandate was given to me a few months ago, no, 1 month ago, I think, by Rose. Where's she? Over there. And it's pretty short. Whoops. That's what she told me. George, can you tell that about background, about advance requests? Can you talk about a case study? Can you talk about the barriers? Can you talk about formulating legislation in Quebec differ from formulating in the rest of Canada? And how has a unique culture in Quebec enabled this order? So I have to do this in 40 minutes. So I don't know what I would do, but I will try to do it. So the first part is kind of historical. Second part is technical. The almost last part is political, and the other one is sociological. So let's go in the mandate, the first part. Background about how advance requests became law in Quebec. It's pretty interesting to first know what is advance request. It is only for neurodegenerative diseases, cognitive neurodegenerative diseases. Alzheimer is the well known of this. It's 70% of all the cognitive neurodegenerative disease represents by Alzheimer, but there's some more. The law has been adopted in June in 2023 in Quebec. That was a Bill 11 at that time. It's enforced since October 13, so it means that it now 5 months of that law is enforced. There are specific terms and conditions, and we will look at it. It's still not recognized at the federal level at the criminal code. So that's the problem we have in Quebec. Not really a problem, we'll see that. So first of all, why MAID? It's everywhere in Canada. In 2003-2004, as you know, probably in Quebec, we have the Commission des soins de fin de vie, End of Life Commission, who looks at every MAID report. And the last year, there was 7.3 deaths that were made by MAID. The vast majority of the population is in favor of MAID, so no problem with that. Excuse me. But what is important is that you see here at the beginning of the line, it's in 2014 and 15. So there was of course, no MAID. And then that was the first part of the legislation in Quebec and in Canada. So the patient must be at the end of his life or with natural death reasonably foreseeable. But then, as you know, in 2021, the law has been changed. So you see an increase in Quebec, and the same thing in Canada. We see an increase. But what is important and interesting is that in the last year, the last report, we're coming to see a trend of slowing down of that curve. So all those people, those doctors and those opponents who said that, with a medical aid in dying, the doctors will go in the hospital and see, oh, you lady, I think you're okay for 2 months. You lady, no, I think we just start that right now. So it's completely stupid. There's the person, the public, the person wants to go to the end of their life. The vast majority of persons want to go to the end of their life. And the same thing in Canada, out of Quebec. It's exactly the same thing. And you can see here the slowing of the curve that it begins. And I don't think that we'll go more than 9 or 10% of death by MAID in the next years. So from Law 2 in Quebec to the Criminal Code in Canada to Law 11 in Quebec. So what was the, to answer to Rose, why did Quebec did that? Because there's two things. The first thing is that three things. In 92, there was a Nancy B case. There was a young woman. She was a young woman, 25. She had a Guillain-Barré disease, and she asked her doctor, which was a friend of mine, she was an hemato-oncologist, to stop the respirator, to take off the respirator, because she was paralyzed, completely paralyzed on the respirator since 2 years. And she said, well, I don't want to live in that way anymore, just take off the respirator. So my friend, who was in a lawyer's family, said, I will go in court, because if I took off the respirator, well, she will die, and I can be accused of murder. So she went in court, and in Superior Court in Quebec, and the judge saw Nancy B and said, well, she is totally apt. She asked to take off the respirator on a intellectual and reasonable mind. So she said, yeah, you can take off the respirator. So it was the first time that this went in court, and this was very well accepted at that time. So just after that, couple of years after, in 2009, the Collège des Médecins du Québec made a very ethical reflection. The report of a working group in medical ethics said, after 1 year of work, we must recognize that there are exceptional situations where euthanasia could be considered as a final stage of care, and allow doctors to assume their responsibilities in their situation. So the big difference, and I was there at that time with friends at Collège des Médecins, the big difference is that in Quebec, the Collège des Médecins, the doctors began this reflection. So it was very important, because they worked for 2 or 3 years in that. And then following that, there was a commission sur le mourir dans la dignité. There was a cross-party parliamentary committee that worked for 4 years. They went all over the province. They meet people, they meet a couple of experts, they meet doctors, they meet a lot of persons. So almost everybody in Quebec in those days were a little bit, they heard about euthanasia, they heard about MAID. So the reflection went in the society more than the rest of Canada, because I remember that in 2014, when our law has been adopted, the rest of Canada was looking at us, what's going on in Quebec? What does Quebec want? As you know that. So that commission did a very fantastic work. And then, so that's why we had in June 2014, the Act respecting end-of-life care. At that time, the criminal code was, of course, not changed. So we were against the criminal code, but we were on our shared competence in health. And we went through that. But as you know, in 2015, the Supreme Court made a fantastic decision, as you remember, unanimous decision. So it was a great pushing forward for our law in Quebec. And then they obliged the federal code to change the criminal code. That has been done in July 2016. So in those years, we were, as you used to know the law before, the patient must be at the end of his life, or the patient must be with a natural death reasonably foreseeable. But also in Quebec, the case of Miss Gladu and Mr. Truchon went in court with a team of 2 lawyers, in fact, against 5 lawyers in Canada, plus multiple lawyers behind, to said, well, it's the end-of-life criteria and the natural death reasonably foreseeable criteria are not constitutional, because they don't respect the decision of the Supreme Court. So that's why they changed at that time. So since then, the end-of-life criteria has been taken off in our law, and take off from the criminal code a little bit later. So now, Gladu Truchon is here. In June 2023, then we had in Quebec the adoption of the law modifying the Act of End-of-Life Care, and we had at that time advance request made in the law, and also withdrawal of the exemption for palliative care residences that were allowed not to give made to patients, mostly because of religious factors. But now there's no exception at all in all the province of Quebec. There's one hospital which is a bit more religious, but they cannot do it. Somebody went in the Superior Court of Quebec, and the Superior Court said, you must follow the law for the patients. So now we're there, and the advance request is enforced since the end of October. As you know, criminal code is still not changed, and mental health and major minors are not in the law. But we are also in our shared competence in health. So what is the process to make an advance request? The advance request the DAMM is in French, sorry about that. Advance requests were made, ensure that the person who receives a diagnosis of cognitive neurodegenerative pathology can obtain made through an advance request at a time when they deem it relevant for them according to their values. Advance request has been adopted in Quebec in October and is enforced since October 24. But it's not yet in the criminal code. Advance request, the criteria are those. You must have a diagnosis of a serious and incurable illness leading to incapacity. The most well-known is Alzheimer, but there's some other more like dementia of Lewy body dementia, some other kind of dementia like this. The second most important is vascular dementia, pretty often mixed with Alzheimer. So you must have a diagnosis of that. You cannot ask advance request in case you would have Alzheimer later. For example, if your two parents have Alzheimer's disease, you say, well, I'm at risk to have Alzheimer's disease. No, you cannot. You must have a diagnosis of the Alzheimer's disease. Advance request must be done when the person is competent, is apt. So you cannot do this when you're not apt anymore, of course. Must be done by the person herself and for herself. It cannot be done by any person of the family. It must be done by the person herself. The advance request allows you to receive made in the future under certain conditions when you will no longer be able to consent for the care of medical aid in dying. You can see all that on Quebec government website. You just type medical aid in dying advance request and you will all get it. So there are different type of dementia. As I told, Alzheimer is the most frequent one, very often mixed with vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, pig disease, etc. What is the procedure now? Procedure for making an advance request. We call that, it's a two-step procedure, technical part if you want. The first step is the person must talk with a health professional or social service professional to receive support in the process. The person must describe in detail in his request manifestations such as symptoms or signs related to his or her illness, and which will constitute the expression of his consent to receive medical assistance in dying when he or she has become unable to consent care and all the conditions provided by the law are met. So the first step is that the person herself will discuss with the doctor or nurse, sorry about that, will discuss with the doctor or nurse to say, well, I'm going to look at that. We're going to look at that in a few minutes. And I want to have made when I will be at that stage or at that stage or at that stage. So it's very private. It's very specific to every person. As you know, Alzheimer's disease was divided in the first years in 3 stages from 1 to 7. Don't worry to bring some milk. So there's stages. Now we're talking in all dementias, we're talking of mild, moderate, or severe. Normally, the person will make her advance request when she's in that part, when there's a mild disease. When you're becoming at stage 4 or 5, it should be a little bit more difficult. At stage 4, it's okay, but at stage 5, normally we will ask the people many questions to see if that person is really competent or apt. Normally, also the patient who are in that stage, in moderate stage, if some of you know a person with Alzheimer, it's the period where you say, well, my father or my mother cannot live in her apartment anymore, so we will put her in hospital somewhere. So, and of course, in the severe stage, there's nothing to do for advance requests. So the disease that leads to incapacity will affect the various spheres of brain functions at different rates and not always according to the same evolutionary pattern. When you have a cancer, for example, a pancreas cancer, normally you know what will be the stages, and you can vary from 1 year to 2. But in all those dementias, we don't know, and it can go from one patient to another. It may go from more cognitive problems in their mobility, for example, or more cognitive problems in their language. So it's very difficult, very different from one person to another, and it may last many years. So, excuse me, the damage to the person's spheres of life, the other appearance and severity may vary from one type of dementia to another. So we're looking at those 5 major cognitive spheres, which is common activities like activity of daily living, banking, shopping, laundry, etc. The other step is communication. How is the patient is able to speak, to talk, or to read, or to write? How is the patient going with her mobility, coordination, walker? Is there many falls? How can the patient eat? Can that person eat by herself or not? Then we go to cognitive faculties. We're talking with the person with that. Short and long-term memory. As you know, normally the short memory is leaving the first part in those diseases. The long-term memory may last many years. But when the person is coming to lost her long-term memory, then we have a problem. Hygiene. Behavioral and neuropsychiatric changes are usually more in more advanced disease. So when I meet people, I had 3 and up to now. When I meet people, I will say, look at all that. I have all those criteria over here, those cognitive problems. We go through all that. And then I tell them, for example, if you lose your driver license, is it a reason for you to ask for me? Well, up to now, the person will say, no, not at all. Okay, great. So you just make the same reflection down the road if you want it. So, for example, when we're going to feeding, if you have to be fed by a caregiver or a family member, that person has to put food in your mouth. Is it a reason for you to ask for me? So some people will say, well, if I cannot eat by myself, I think I want to go further than that in my disease. For memory problems, for example, these only are examples. Many memory problems worsen and the person may begin to no longer recognize her loved ones. And also we have to translate that in medical terms. So in medical terms, we'll say no longer recognizing loved ones frequently or constantly. So this is the clinical aspects to discuss. This is the paper here. We go through that, but after examples and all that, the person understand and the family understand. So normally, well, that's what I do. I leave them with all those papers and go through that slowly and see if that stage of the disease will make you ask for MAID because you don't want to go further in that disease. So the person, it will be very specific to each person. One will ask to have MAID pretty soon, and the other one will have MAID later. But remember, those persons are apt to decide for themselves. They will be helped by their family also. So in the second part of that first part, if I can say that, the procedure, the person must name one or two trusted persons. If these are, they call trusted third parties. It's not mandatory, but it's really better. The role is to ensure that the wishes of the person expressed in his or her advance request for medical assistance in dying can be known and respected if all the conditions provided by the law are met. So, for example, if a lady will say, well, my son will be my trusted party. Okay, perfect. But the son is not there to say, oh, hey, medical team, it's time to give MAID to my mother. No, the third party will only say, please, medical team, will you please look at my mother, look at her advance request in the government site, and see if now she is at that stage where she didn't want to go further. So the first part is done by the person, of course, with her family, and the third party, the trusted third party, is there to ensure that in the disease, when the person will not be apt anymore, that she will be able to be evaluated to get MAID later. So then after that, when we do all that, we have.
Just very quickly, does that trusted person legally have to have power of attorney or not?
Not at all.
Okay.
No. No, not at all. It's only a person who knows the advance request form, and she knows that, for example, my mother don't want to go further in the disease when she will not be apt anymore to eat by herself, for example. So the last part of the process is that we must sign the paper with the person, with the doctor, with the doctor or nurse, with the one or two trusted parties, and one or two witnesses. The two witnesses may be anybody who just can see that, yes, I see that it's Helen that signed the paper and George that signed the paper as a doctor. So that's only there. The witness doesn't even have to know what is in the paper, what is in the advance request. So, and to be valid, the advance request must be filled in the register provided by the law. So how does it work? This is the form. At the beginning, for 1 meeting, 2 meeting, 3 meeting, we're just talking with the family, with the person, and we're just filling all that written by hand or just on the computer. And then after that, we exchange so that we can go further and precise the parts where the signs and symptoms where the person doesn't want to go further. We just narrow all that. And then we have to what I call translate that in medical terms, which will be in that part of the form here. So now, what we're doing, I am with a family, that is, everybody is okay, then they are okay with what we wrote, then I, as a doctor or nurse, will write on the computer directly online, on that part here. I will write the symptoms or the signs that the person told me. So it's really the wills and the values of the person. And then I will translate that on the other part, which is a medical part. Because probably I won't be there in 2, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years when the person will be at that stage. It will be another doctor, it will be another provider. So that provider didn't know that person at that time. The provider must understand what are the medical terms, what are the objectives of the patient. So that's why this is the way it has been done. So Rose asked me for a case study. I'm okay for the time?
Yeah, you're about halfway through.
So a case study. This is a real case. Of course, I took off the name. It's a lady of 49 years old with a, how do you say precoce, with a
Early onset dementia.
early onset dementia, Alzheimer. So I wrote after I think, 4 meetings with her and her family, sons and also her spouse. I wrote there a kind of resume, a kind of summary of what she told me. This is there. So this is her own will. And then I translate that here in a medical terms. So, for example, the first part here, I always told my patient also to write that I request made when I have reached one or other of these symptoms. So, for example, this part here, ne plus pouvoir m'alimenter moi-même, no longer able to feed myself, or having irregular urinary or fecal incontinence. Another example here, having to receive heavy medication to avoid psychosis, delirium, or wandering. Because that lady saw her father having Alzheimer's disease, and she saw her father in real tough psychosis. She don't want to go there. So that's why she wrote there. She wrote that, yeah. So the second part, the medical part is there. For example, inability to feed independently. Need to for medication to avoid psychosis, delirium, or wandering. So those parts here are pretty objective. So another doctor or another nurse, another provider will be able in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years to see, well, I look at the paper, I look at the patient, she's now inept, she don't remember at all that she asked for medically dying, but I have those here, objective here. So can a person withdraw or modify her advance request? Yes, a person who is able to consent of care may withdraw or modify his or her request at any time. That process, the person must be accompanied by a doctor or a specialized nurse practitioner who will answer that it's really the will of the person, but that person must be still apt to decide to change her advance request, because if she's not apt anymore, of course, she cannot change her will. So to modify an advance request, the person must make a new one. As soon as the second one is completed, then the first one is taken off the government register. So now we're going 2 years, 3 years, 4 years later, what we call the part 2 or le temps 2. So the person must have made a request according with the law. The person must present on a recurrent basis the clinical manifestations related to their illness and describe in their request. The person must have a medical situation that leads 2 competent professionals, nurse or doctors, to believe, and this is very important, is the verbatim of the law, to believe on the basis of the information available to them, so the form, and according to the clinical judgment that they exercise. So that part is very, very important. The ministry always rely on that, and I rely on that, according to the clinical judgment that they exercise. So that person is experiencing persistent and unbearable physical or psychological suffering that cannot be relieved in conditions deemed tolerable. Why is it important? Because if the person is demented, of course, nobody knows about her psychological or existential suffering. No, we can evaluate the physical suffering, but not the psychological suffering. Of course, that person is demented. So why this is very important that sentence is very important according to the clinical judgment that they exercise. And for me, the person who wrote her advance request, at that time, she didn't want to go there because that was her existential suffering at that time. I don't want to be at the end of that disease. I don't want to be bedridden. I don't want to be yelling all day long. So even if that person now is not, we don't know if she's psychologically suffering, but we know that she didn't want to go there. And you know what? My wife would say this stupid example, George, but I would say anyway. If a person in her will say, I give $3 million to my cat, and somebody will take care of my cat. You can say, well, my aunt was totally stupid. I should take care of that $3 million. No, it's in the will. So you cannot move that anymore. You cannot change that. I know this is a very bad comparison, but anyway, you cannot change that. So for me, the person who was happy and said, I don't want to be in the last stage of that disease, it's a respect of that person to follow her will at that time. So what are the barriers related to advance request? For the patients, and I want to thank my colleagues to their valuable contribution in that section. Dr. Pierre Vien, Guy Morissette, Daniel Michaud, Laurent Boivin, all those four are made provider, but also they're doing since 3-4 months now advance requests. So I asked them, what are the barriers you think? So just to answer Rose. So the patients, given the quantity and complexity of things to be explained, and you see that, they are not incapacitated, but nevertheless suffer from major neurocognitive disorders and have difficulty to understand. If you take a person at stage 2, if we take the stage of Alzheimer at the beginning, well, the person will understand, of course. But if you are pretty late in stage 3 or mild disease, and 4, maybe it may be long, and I have experienced that. You must repeat and repeat. The person is apt, but you must repeat and be clear about what you're telling. Difficulty projecting themselves in the future to identify the clinical manifestations to which they retain and have difficulty making a choice. And sometimes people will make a lot of choices, so we have to narrow that and we have to try to understand what they really mean. In fact, those persons who already saw an Alzheimer patient like mother or father, they know what's going on. But for many patients, they have the Alzheimer diagnosis, but they don't know what will go on. They don't know people with Alzheimer's, so it's pretty tough to that person to just think of what could happen later. So it will usually take 3 or 4 meetings of 1 hour and a half, 2 hours with those patients and the family or loved one to make sure that everything is well understood, that it really represents their will and their values. Other barriers for the loved ones tend to take a lot of space in formulating the advance request. Excuse me, I just forgot the French over there. Directive avancée pour l'aide médicale à mourir, which is DAAMM. I didn't have this experience, but some of my colleagues had that experience with people that was a little bit longer with the loved ones. And they have great difficulty grasping the concept of contemporary suffering, which is in the law, in addition to objectify clinical manifestation. In fact, in the law, the person must experience persistent and bearable physical or psychological suffering. This is what I told you a few minutes before. In fact, this is a problem for a lot of people. How can I evaluate a psychological suffering? So that's why I did what I told you to.
Unbearable? Unbearable.
Yeah, unbearable. You're right. Thank you very much. I will tell my wife that she'd see that. Always her fault. For doctors and nurses, it usually take between 3 to 4 visits with phone calls or emails. And also the problem is to recruit colleagues who want to get involved is difficult at this time because many reasons. It took time. So that's why the colleagues I show you, we're all retired. So we took our time. It's not a problem to take time to see those patients. But the doctor who is in a regular practice with 15 minutes in each patient cannot do that, of course. I know the doctor in Gaspésia. In fact, she's still a family doctor, but when she has that kind of request, she will give an appointment to the patient at the beginning of the evening so she can have time. But not all the doctors are like this. Nurses are really more involved in that, but we don't have many more. Because remember, in Canada, you had practitioner nurses since the beginning, 2016, but in Quebec, we only have this since December 23. So the problem is most with the criminal code, but the criminal code, as you know, it's not permitted to, it's not allowed to have advance requests. But as you know, probably, the criminal code is federal. But the application of the criminal code, every article of the criminal code, the application is in each province. So you cannot have a lawyer from Alberta, for example, coming in Quebec and say, well, I will give a suit to that doctor because he gave answer. No, that must go through the province of Quebec or Ontario. So the Attorney General in September 9, 2024, gave instruction regarding criminal prosecution, and he said, many considering, and he wrote that it will not be in the public interest to authorize the filing of criminal proceedings in connection with a death that occur in the context of medical assistance in dying, or to allow private prosecution to proceed if analysis of all the evidence confirms that this care was provided in accordance with the freely and informed wishes regarding care, taking into account the conditions set out in the Act. So we are protected by that. Some doctors are really reluctant, but we are protected for that. And is it new? Not at all. It has been the same thing 50 years ago in the abortion law. Remember, there is no law. There was a law condemning the abortion in the year 60, and then there's no law since then. But it was the same thing in Quebec. The general attorney said to the prosecutor, "You will not prosecute any doctors who did an abortion since the Morgenthaler cases." So we have been in Quebec 11 years without any prosecution, even if the criminal code was not changed at that time. So there's something that happens in the history before. People's response to this new made legislation, population is largely in favor. Alzheimer's Society is in favor now, but access is difficult to the limited availability of family doctors. There's still a legal insecurity due to out-of-phase criminal code. That's why we're asking to change the criminal code. And in fact, the Conservative parties wrote to us that they won't change anything. The Liberal, Mr. Carney, said that he would probably look at that and perhaps would be open to change the criminal code. Of course, the Bloc Québécois is in favor, but they cannot change the criminal code. So this time-consuming. There's a certainties about how much the suffering criterion will be evaluated in a demented patient. I talk of that. A law not known well enough by professionals. This is a problem. The law is not well known enough by the professionals. But the law is there since now November, so it makes only 5 months. So as at the beginning with the MAID law, the criminal code in the rest of Canada, many and more people will be, professional will be, have more knowledge about the law, and I think we'll go through that. But it takes time, of course. How does formulating legislation in Quebec differ from formulating laws in other provinces? This is the political part. In fact, what does Quebec want? There's no difference between Quebec and the rest of Canada. But as a distinct, and I will read it, as a distinct society, we tend to use all of the rights that Constitution and Charter of Rights give us, which means that we try to take all the space that the law can give us in our phase of competence, even if it does not please the ROC or the federal government. You understand that I'm not a politician. So the last one is social. How has the unique culture in Quebec enabled this and other made legislation to be passed? And now how do I account for this? First of all, it's a very interesting question. It's multifactorial answer or response. It may take a whole evening or a whole day or a whole week to answer that. Historical, we are French, so more Latin, versus Anglo-Saxon origins and the rest of Canada. And we have a part of our societal thinking is on quality of life, enjoying life. We are, as you know, we have a Catholic real background, but now the Catholic religion is really far away since the year 70. So we are really a secular society we're atheists at 24%, or agnostic at 52%. It's the highest rate in Canada. So this is a part of the explanation also. We don't have anymore the religious thinking about that. And it's the same thing for MAID. A lot of old peoples will ask MAID. And I remember one lady that she said, well, if God is not, he doesn't agree with MAID, I don't want to sit beside him for the rest of eternity. I think it was pretty good. As in Canada, we are a progressive society, tolerant. Canada is there. It's completely different of US. I don't have to make any drawings of that. And Quebec political autonomy is very important, as you probably know when you read newspapers. So, am I in 40 minutes?
Pretty close.
Pretty close? A little bit more?
We'll give it to you, yeah.
So, you can have English information on the website. You can go also on our site. There's an English part on our site. And I thank you for the attention with the sunset.
Thanks, George. That was great. I will reiterate, the Quebec government website has a lot of really helpful information. It's quite easy to understand, and it's pretty clear. So if you're looking for details, feel free to go there. I have lots of questions. I'm just going to ask one, maybe, before I take questions, because I'm sure you have questions too. Right now, we're really focused on advanced requests for people with a diagnosis of a capacity diminishing disease. Have you talked in Quebec at all, or do you think through the Commission's work they'll ever look at advanced requests prior to a diagnosis? I'm thinking cardiovascular, the risk of brain injury from a fall.
We didn't look at that. A lot of people are asking for that, but we're not there anymore. One step at a time.
Just curious. Okay, question from the room?
No, you're right.
Yeah. Anyone have a question they'd like to ask?
Go ahead.
Okay,
remember, there's never stupid question. Answers may be stupid, but it's not your fault.
Okay, so quick show of hands. Okay, so Shelley, we'll start here maybe?
Can you go back to the suffering piece? Because if you say that I don't want to live under these circumstances when my disease goes to those things, presumably that is the statement that equals suffering. So what are you assessing as suffering?
You want to repeat the question?
Yeah, so how do you assess suffering? Because they've described it ahead of time.
That's one of the problems we have with that law, because we must be in the context of the law for medical aided dying. So medical aided dying, you must have a diagnosis, and you must have a suffering and how do you say that? Decline, irreversible decline. Thank you. So we have to evaluate the suffering. So this is a problem for many doctors, but for me and for many of my friends and colleagues, this is not really a problem because of what you said. The person told and wrote when she was apt that I don't want to go there. Even if I'm what they call, I don't know if you have that term in English, la démence heureuse, a happy dementia. You have this, which is totally stupid. We can say dementia without any effects, for something like that. But this is a problem for many doctors or nurses. But for other one, we're going to move with that. We're going to progress with that concept. And for me and for many others, what is important is what the person wrote when she was apt. I don't want to go there. I don't want to be bedridden. I don't want to yell at my daughters. And so, even if I don't, it doesn't seem that I'm not suffering. So we're not yet we didn't have any MAID yet with that. Of course, they will come in probably more than 1 year, 2 years, 3 years for those who made their advance request. No, of course, because you must be apt. So the dementia is not, you're okay on Friday and then the Monday you're totally demented. No, the dementia is really going very slowly. So the person must be apt to write her advance request so that when she will not be apt anymore, it will be at least in 12 months, at least, but I think it will be more in 1 year and a half 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, etc. So we'll have an evolution in that in our thinking. But the main thing for me and for my colleagues is that, and I think for the population, for the society, is that the person made her own request following her own values. And that's it. This is what is important.
Thanks. Over here in the blue? Yeah.
Yes, hi. My question is that there are many significant francophone communities in Canada outside of Quebec. I'm wondering if they have the same kind of philosophy as in Quebec would have, and furthermore, would they be useful in developing institutional compassion in the rest of Canada?
The question is, there's some other population, French-speaking population in the rest of Canada outside Quebec, and you're wondering if they will have the same reflection. I cannot answer that, of course, because they are under the criminal code. Of course, they are in other provinces. So I cannot answer that. If you're looking, probably I would say in the north of Ontario, there's a French community pretty close from Quebec. Perhaps they have the same philosophy or mentality, but I didn't. You should have told me that. I will do some sociological research, but
Yeah,
I really don't know, because they are all under the criminal code.
Yeah, and
That we don't.
based on what we hear, there's nothing to indicate that there's higher interest, more communication, more discussion from any of those communities. So I don't think we've got anything substantive that we could base that on, but definitely something interesting to look into. Was there a question back? Yep, sir. Jack.
Oh,
Oh,
great.
we've got a mic.
Thank you. Prior to the legislation, 2016, if that's the key year, the CMA vigorously opposed MAID of any kind. And even after it was passed, even the pioneering doctors that were MAID supporters and practitioners were opposed to advanced requests, many of them. And so I'm really curious if you could talk a little more about Quebec medical community, how it is so different, the medical community, compared to the medical community in the rest of Canada, and how many doctors are prepared to provide MAID in Quebec based on advanced requests?
Oh, based on advance request, I don't know. Up to now, there was the last year there was 1,800 doctors who give MAID to patients on 23,000 doctors, but a lot of them are retired, or they're not practicing anymore, or they are in kind of a specialty that they don't have patients. For example, pathologists, they see patients, but they're dead. Yeah. So
Not much help.
yeah. So for advanced requests, now the resistance we see is with family doctors, because it takes a lot of time. So that's the main, for now, it's the main barrier. But there's no waiting list up to now. We're answering to those patients, and there's not that much. I don't know where.
It was almost 500, I think,
Yeah,
just under
I
500.
don't know how come I missed that on my slide. Hey, you take off on my slide.
The slide
No,
that
no,
has
that's
the
okay.
number of requests that's been completed, I think it was, I don't know,
470 something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we had
there you go.
470.
467 requests, but I didn't see how many were processed.
There's no one has been
No one has
processed
died.
but has been accepted by
Yeah.
there's almost 20% of those that has been rejected, but not because of what is written in the report in the form. It's because of a mistake in dates or something that, or the person didn't. Even me, I made a mistake in one of my patient, so because I didn't see that the witness signed another date. And everybody must do it. So that's why there's right now something around 20% in March that has been rejected, but not rejected, it just has to be
Clerical.
change, corrected, that's it. So for the MAID in Quebec is pretty well accepted, except for 5-10% of doctors, but we know some of them, well, I would say 5%. It's on religious basis, mostly. The other one, because they're not very accustomed with that. But what is very interesting is that we see more and more young doctors and young nurses that are practicing, that are coming with us to see how this is done, and they want to do MAID later. So this is very interesting because the young generation understand that medicine cannot treat anything up to the end of life. Medicine is a science, but there's something that we have to stop sometimes. We cannot go further. And always remember that, I always say that in my conference, life is a mortal disease, sexually transmitted.
Okay, was there a question just in front? Yeah, right in the middle. Yeah.
Can we take this one?
Yeah, we're going to take this one in the middle first. Oh, okay, you want to do it that way, sure.
Who is eligible for MAID in Quebec? Do you have to be a Quebec resident, a Quebec taxpayer, a Quebec health card?
For MAID, yeah, for
Holder?
MAID. It's the same that in other provinces. You must have you must be a resident of Quebec with your healthcare card. That's it.
And how long
it's
would
all
it-
the same criteria. Than
What
the
would
rest.
be the time frame on that? If somebody,
What?
what would be the time frame on that? If somebody chose to move to Quebec, how long would it take to get that health card, to get?
Oh, that's a legal question. I cannot answer that. Probably that if you're Canadian and you come in Quebec, or you move in other provinces,
Yeah.
Quebec are not one, probably it's maybe pretty fast. Is there a lawyer here, somebody?
It's 1 year, because I moved from Quebec to here.
Huh?
I think it's about 6 to 1 year, because I moved from Quebec to Toronto, and I got my health card about, I think, after 6 months or so.
6 months later? I think it must be different in Quebec. I don't know,
Okay.
really, I don't know.
Can we pass the mic over to the middle? And then maybe while we're waiting, Amanda, do you have one online you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. If I could just get a microphone, would be
Oh, you need
Oops.
one too. No, don't
The
give that
question
away.
I have is, let's say it was an individual, a single person, got the diagnosis, filled out all of the paperwork, and then down, they must be in a care home of some sort. But what is actually going to prompt? Who's going to put their hand up and say, oh, this person asked for this service like 5 years ago? How is that going to happen?
That's a good question. Normally, that person, it must be written in her admission at the residence or anywhere, and said, I made my advance request. And then the medical team will have to check time by time when the person will be not apt anymore, of course, what was written in her advance request. But as I told, we're not there yet, so we'll see with the evolution of that. Those questions will be probably more pertinent.
Pertinent once we get to
Yeah, once we get
delivery.
to.
Yeah, and George, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's nothing to prevent a healthcare worker, for example, who knows that the record is on file from initiating the process if there wasn't a
No.
trusted third party, right?
No,
So
no, that's
if
right.
you were in the type of setting you describe, it is possible that someone working with the individual could flag it, because Quebec has a central registry, unlike the rest of us, where these things are all kept on file, so.
Yeah.
Okay,
So the medical team will have the obligation to look at the provincial registry to see, well, is Aunt Martha made her advance request? So what did she wrote over there? And then we'll see. But the process is the same with MAID. 2 professionals with all the other criteria must be encountered with that.
Okay, so Amanda, a question from our online audience.
Yes, lots of great questions from our virtual attendees. This audience member is curious, why is it that the Quebec legislature has restricted advance requests to those with a neurodegenerative condition? Are there not other kinds of diagnoses or conditions which could similarly impact decision-making capacity and merit an advance request?
Well, in fact, if you have, for example, neurodegenerative disease from Parkinson's disease. I had a patient of this some time ago. The Parkinson may lead to a request of MAID, but also the Parkinson may lead to a dementia. And the person may do a contemporary request, if she wants it, or may have a advanced request for the dementia. Why didn't we look at this for other kind of diseases where there's not that much diseases that will go with a neurodegenerative disease that is not under a dementia kind. There's not only Alzheimer's. There must be a problem with liver, all that. So there's many disease that can go with a dementia. This is why it's important to have a diagnosis of cognitive neurodegenerative diseases, even if that disease come with a physical disease. But with physical disease, there's two ways. There's a contemporary request for MAID and the advanced request for MAID. So the person must try to understand that, and it's our duty to make them understand that and try to do the better choice.
Do you want to share a second question, Amanda?
Absolutely. So this audience member asks, what happens if a patient's trusted person or persons changes their mind and no longer wishes to fulfill their role?
And that's why the law asks for to have two trustee persons. Perhaps the two of them could change their mind, but in fact we think, well, the ministry think, the law think that if there's one that can change his mind, it would be, well, improbable that the second one will also change his mind. Well, we never know, but we'll see. But the other thing is that, can you really figure that a daughter or a son who see his father or his mother going down Alzheimer's disease or any kind of dementia will say, well, no, I don't want to follow what she said. I want to see her or him go down and down of that disease and become completely demented. I have some difficulty to cope with that.
We do hear, George, even in terms of advanced care planning, that people will often comment to us, oh, I've named my friend because I feel like my friend would be better positioned to keep things moving than perhaps a child who may get caught up in the emotion. I don't know, when you're seeing trusted third parties, are you seeing mostly family members?
No, trusted party may be anybody.
Yeah,
trusted party.
And what are you seeing? Are they mostly family members so far?
Up to now, yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, question in the room? Yes, in the back. You, yep.
You keep mentioning, from the Quebec point of view, a registry. So is this a government registry where every one of these requests in a dementia case so it's available, it's online, you don't have a muddle of doctor's notes in a file where they're trying to figure out.
Yeah, so the question is, in Quebec, is there a registry, is this a government-run registry, and are all of these advanced requests in this registry?
Absolutely, there's one program in the government of Quebec. This is under the RAMQ for health insurance. Health insurance?
Life insurance?
Health
and life insurance? Oh, for the health benefit, like the
commission.
Health program, OHIP, whatever we're calling it.
So there's one registry, and we all have access, as doctor, we have access to that with our names and numbers and all that, and password and all that. And then I can see, well, I will write the advance request for Marta, with the names of the trusted parties and all that, and it's only in one site. So it may be consulted everywhere in the province of Quebec, in doctor's office or in hospital or in residency and all that. So there's only one place.
right here? Yep. She's got a microphone for you.
Yeah, the microphone will go there.
Just make
don't
sure
worry.
everyone can hear.
So my question is, yeah, my question is, are other provinces, have any of the other provinces approached Quebec about?
Any provinces, I don't know, but Hélène, yes, and Dying with Dignity, yes. And a lot of doctors, I think of Chantal Perrault and some doctors that I know, because they are very interesting in that, because as you know, in Quebec it's the same thing, in Canada it's the same thing in Quebec. Vast majority of the population is afraid of the disease, and the Alzheimer's disease will go more and more in the next years. So it's a very important public health problem, and we cannot just put that under the carpet and say, well, we don't look at them anymore. So advance request is one of the answers, but I know some people that have Alzheimer, and they don't think they have Alzheimer, they don't think they have a disease, and they don't think about advance requests. So it's really not a matter of looking at the Alzheimer, it's only a matter of looking at what the population wants. So if some people don't want to go further in that disease, that's our job as doctors and nurses and health professionals to help them. And if we are lucky enough to live in that country that is it is very, excuse me, I'm losing my words, is more progressive, well, we have to take that chance for now, and we're not alone. Belgium, Netherlands have also made laws and all that, so we have to go further in that, to listen what the people want. It's not a matter of eugenism, of killing people, not at all. It's a matter of what people want. They have a disease that will bring them to their death, that's for sure, that will bring them to their death in lack of dignity. So what can we do as a medical team or as health professionals?
Yeah. So in terms of what we're hearing, I think BC is the only province where, let's say there's some introductory conversations with MLAs going on, nothing at the government level as yet, but certainly there seems to be a little more openness to having some discussion. Federally, just as a reminder, the government did launch that advance request consultation back in November. So they did a number of roundtables, including with organizations, health authorities, provincial, territorial reps, and they also did a public survey. There is a report expected out as a result of that consultation, but it's been delayed because of the prorogation of government and now the election. So as soon as we have a new government, we'll be pushing Health Canada to get that out and see where that goes next.
And remember what I told at the beginning of the historical part, we have a law in Quebec. The rest of Canada doesn't have a law. The rest of Canada is under the criminal code, so it's really more tough to change the criminal code than to change our law.
Yeah, it would have to be a very daring province, I think, that took a next step, which is why we're advocating so hard for federal legislation. Yeah, it's right here at the front.
I was just wondering, why is the UN trying to revoke what Quebec has right now, and do you think they will succeed?
Well, the UN, so this is the UN Commission report. So that isn't really speaking about Quebec. It's talking about the not reasonably foreseeable natural deaths. So people who are considered what we call track 2, whose deaths are not foreseeable. They're stating that they feel it discriminates against those individuals because it's forcing them to have made or have the opportunity to have made. We would have the exact counter argument that by not allowing them to have the choice, we are in fact discriminating against them. So we're working on a response to the UN. There's been a number of papers and things issued. So I think maybe something's on our website. Oh yes, our response to the Commission is on our website with a link to another paper that was quite informative that Jocelyn Downey and James Downer wrote, basically debunking, I would say, many of the statements in that report.
Our answer is also on our website, but it's really interesting because that report of the
Commission,
ONU,
UN Commission,
has been really under the radar in Quebec. Nobody talk of it because first of all, the Supreme Court has been very interesting about that case. And also we had in Quebec the Gladue-Truchon cases 6 years ago, and the Judge Baudouin discussed of that special part of handicapped person really in a fantastic way. So we have all the answers over there. It will be really surprising that the Supreme Court will change their mind. Remember, the Supreme Court made their decision unanimously, which is the most highest level of decision.
Okay, so Stuart.
Hi, I find it discouraging if I understand the requirements for receiving MAID with an advanced request that I might, for example, be diagnosed with Alzheimer's and be at an early stage, but not have achieved the condition that would allow for a clinical judgment that I have unbearable psychological suffering. I have to effectively wait until I'm experiencing unbearable psychological suffering. Is that the case?
No, remember that Alzheimer's disease or any kind of dementia, you may have contemporary MAID whenever you want, as long as you have the diagnosis. You must be apt. That's why advance request is interesting, because you may wait, you may still have fun or pleasure to go with your family to have a good food at a restaurant. You may have fun seeing your grandchildren, all that. But when you're, the problem is when you're becoming inept anymore to decide. But for all those people in Canada, the same thing. For all those people who have a dementia diagnosis, whatever the kind of diagnosis, you may have contemporary MAID, but you must be apt. So it means that you may lose month or a couple of years of pretty interesting life if you have somebody to help you. But that's the
I see. Then I misunderstand that slide under part 2.
That's okay, no problem at all.
Yeah. We often hear, unfortunately, of people choosing to have MAID early because they're afraid that they will lose the capacity to make the decision at a later date.
We had a lot of patients in Quebec having MAID since 2021 when they had diagnosis of Alzheimer's. I remember one of a colleague, a very well-known doctor who had MAID 3 years ago, I think. But those people will lose their will lose some months or years with their family, with their grandchildren. So
yeah, so we're going to go over to this side and then back to this side.
Not sure over here since 30 minutes.
I know, but she already had a turn. We'll get to her. Go ahead, sir.
Not sure if I heard this correctly, but did you say in Quebec, hospitals or religious institutions have to allow MAID to happen on site rather than a forced transfer that happens in the rest of the country?
Yes, in Quebec, the long-term care homes, hospitals, residences have to allow MAID on site. They're not allowed to force people to go somewhere else.
Well, if the person wants to go in hospital, she may go, but they have to answer if the patient wants to have MAID in her residence, it's her home, so it's in the law, so the person has to be there.
Yeah.
We don't have any more religious residence or part. The last one were they just follow the law. That's it.
There is a challenge to that currently. The Archbishop has challenged that. No, in Quebec, the Archbishop has challenged that ruling, right? So we're waiting to hear.
Oh, no, there's only one. It's a palliative care residence.
Yeah.
The problem is that it has been done by a religious community. The land has been done. And they wrote somewhere that they should not have MAID in the residence, but it's the only one. And the first decision of the court is that you must follow the law. So the thing has not been judged on the, how do you say that
Appeal.
in English? On
the merits of the case?
The merit of the case, thank you.
Okay, so we're...
I told you I need you.
Oh, okay, we're in the middle, and then we'll go up here.
I have a question about the execution of the advanced requests. So I know it's a little bit speculative at this point because they've just been processed. But let's say I put in my request now and in 4 years' time, I'm not of sound mind and I fit that criteria. It's been flagged that I fit the criteria of what I consider suffering. Is someone going to tell me, like, is the process to inform the patient at that time, this is what we're doing, this was your request? And what happens if I at that time say, well, I don't want to do this, but again, am not of sound mind?
Yeah, but in the law, it's exactly as the same as in the criminal code, which means as if the person makes a usual opposition sign. For example, when the person, when the auxiliary nurse come to eat, and the person, yeah, no. So that's called what a regular opposition behavior. We'll see. We'll not dare. But what some of us are talking of is that we are facing a new care. We are facing a care that has been given, that has been asked by a person when she was apt. We must answer that person dignity and will. So what would be the problem to give that person a kind of little pill just to calm herself? Would it be a problem? Giving a pill to lessen the anxiety is a medical care. So we're having a reflection on that. We don't have any answer for now. But I can tell you that many of my colleagues, and for myself the same thing, we're going in that kind of way. Because what is important? What I think or what the person wrote 3 years ago for her own values and for her own dignity.
Yeah, the language in the code is something to the effect of if a person refuses by words or gestures, except for the case of an involuntary gesture. And certainly when we're having broader discussions about advance requests for the rest of the country, we're talking about people signing in their choice to have a sedative or have some kind of medication beforehand that would help them to relax and go ahead, because that person doesn't have the same processes that they had before. So it is not, I think, unusual to expect that they might be surprised or upset or not understand what's going on. So
we'll see.
Okay, we're going
to
bring the mic down here.
Process.
And then, so we'll do this one, and then maybe we'll go back to Amanda for one on the online.
Mostly my question, I think, was answered, but I am wondering about a little bit more if somebody who had certain feelings or thoughts and which they wrote down, and then is quite content, and you sort of
Happy
scoffed,
dementia.
and I don't know enough about dementia, but is quite content in their state, being toileted, being fed, all those things they had said. I am concerned about giving them a pill if they somehow indicate, even though it's an inapt, or whatever would be the French word, an incapable wish. I have always thought that an incapable wish should still trump if it's a contemporaneous wish at the time. Because even in the MAID scheme, which you don't have, you can say no at the last minute. And according to the 5th annual report, there are some who say no at the last minute to a MAID provision. The doctor says, do you still, shall it be your mom consent? So I think we need to think about whether the incapable person could have a lesser kind of wish, but still a wish of no. I'd like to hear any more that you might think about that.
How can I know that the person still have a little bit of cognition? How can I know that? The person is demented 23 hours a day. How can I know that in the last hour, in the last 30 minutes, she still has her...
They don't have even if they don't have cognition, they can have a wish to they can still, if they
How do you know that?
I think it's more if they appear to have happy dementia.
Oh. We're not talking about happy dementia anymore. We're talking about dementia without apparent suffering. Because for a lot of us, happy dementia doesn't exist. It's a kind of, I would say, it's my own perception. I think it's a bad concept. How can you think that you are happy when you are demented?
Isn't that a value judgment that you have?
No, I'm looking at the person.
So you know what would be protective, actually? Is it in the, I'm sorry.
Can you just wait? Shelley, are you done?
No.
I get too engaged. No, somebody wanted to
I
go.
wanted to respond, actually, if you don't mind, just from personal experience. Is that okay? Am I projecting enough? No?
Yeah.
Okay, so my mom turned 100 in October. She was diagnosed in 8 years ago. And prior to that, she would speak and say that she would never, and of course this didn't exist then, really, that she would never ever want to be a burden on me. I'm an only child. Never want to be toileted or fed, none of those things. And she was an OR nurse, very strong. And now she's completely incapacitated. And I see her, and there are moments when I have that same thing of, why does she seem sometimes to be content? Because she no longer has outbursts or becomes aggressive. She sleeps most of the time. It is not a happy dementia. It just is not. From my experience, if this could have been a thing for her, she would have done it, 100%. And even if she would have somehow, she can't even barely verbalize, even if she would go no or whatever, I prefer to give the sedative and carry on.
I think, yeah, and I think that's a great perspective because it's all about our own point of view, right? How we all feel, our individual choice, what we want to see for our end of life and how we would describe that. So, I think that's one of the great things about MAID. It truly is about the person's choice, the person's values, the person's decision. Okay, we're just about out of time. So Amanda, let's take one more from the online audience.
Yeah, so got lots of questions here. So this question is for Georges. Are there any additional considerations or expansions to the current advance request law that you would suggest, or are there any revisions? Or do you think at this point that the legislation is sound as it is?
If I was the ministry, I would try to change the wording of the phrase and the sentence of suffering to put the focus on the patient when she was apt. And I would take off that criteria which is in the MAID regular law, because it may give some problems of interpretation. My main focus for me, and not only for me, I can tell you, not only for me, is that we must rely on what the patient told us when she was apt. We must respect her dignity. We must respect her will at that time. As the same stupid example I gave you for the person who gives money to her cat. I think we must respect that. Because remember, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Since the beginning of the human being on Earth, the lifespan was 30 years. At the French Revolution, the lifespan was 30 years. Since the French Revolution, 1789 to the Second World War, we won 30 years more. At the Second World War, the lifespan of Occidental population was 60 years. Since 1950, since the last 70 years, we won another almost 30 years. This is because of the medicine. This is because of public health. This is because of technical point of view. So I think that we must understand that, and that for me, it's in the medicine. It's medicine to answer to that question. What are we doing with those patients that are becoming older and older and demented? Is it okay to let them live in a hospice? They don't know what they are? And I think we have to think of that beside a moral or religious focus or stuff like that. We have to think of that on the human philosophical point of view. That's and I'm not the only one, I can tell you.
Great. Thanks, George. So that was a lot. So George took us through the legislation, the process, how it works in Quebec, why Quebec got where they wanted to get, and the rest of us have not as yet. I think a ton of questions, obviously, and I know a lot for all of us to think about. Certainly as we're advocating for legislation across the country, we're always thinking about what is the right fit? How do we make sure that the person's wishes are taken care of? You know, Shelley raises a question about capacity. It's not the first time I've heard that question. Clinicians who struggle with the happy dementia concept. How do I show up and kill someone who appears to be perfectly happy drinking their tea? A lot to unpack, but I think important that we continue to advocate and go down this road. So I'd like to thank George, especially for being here tonight, coming from Montreal, sharing his experience.
Excuse me for my English.
We'll bring him back when we're a little further down the path in Quebec so he can share a few more insights as things progress. Just a reminder for anyone who may have forgotten, there is a federal election underway. If you visit our website, dyingwithdignity.ca, click on from the very front page, you can go to our Election Central page, information about party platforms, tools to write letters, and letters to the editor, letters to your candidates. If you hear from your candidate or have any information, please don't hesitate to share it with us. We're kind of gathering it all together, so a couple months from now we can figure out who we'd be best positioned to speak to. And there'll be updates there as you proceed in the next couple weeks. Thanks to everyone in the room and everyone online for joining us tonight. It was great to see you in person and great to see you online. As we heard earlier, we had over 750 people registered, and we have recorded the session. We will be sending a link out to you. I would encourage you to share it with your community and your people around you. Thanks to the GTA chapter for their hard work and great effort in putting this together. We are very fortunate to have 12 chapters and numerous volunteers across the country who provide educational programming for us. Anyone present, if you're interested in a presentation, you want to learn more, don't hesitate to contact the GTA chapter. They do presentations on advanced care planning, end-of-life MAID, and what's called 7 Keys for Navigating a Life-Changing Diagnosis, a new and really interesting presentation. If you're in our virtual audience, please visit our website, and under the About Us tab, you can find chapters across the country and see what they offer in your area. Thanks to the members of the team at DWDC for their help in putting this together. And finally, an enormous thank you to all of our supporters. Because of you, we're able to put together events like this totally free of charge based on your donations. So thank you all for being here, and have a great evening, and don't forget to vote.